I'm excited about this message. This is an interesting topic because something I dealt with for a long time growing up. My parents grew up in the ministry, and they would always tell us stories. In particular, I remember my dad telling me that he wanted to be a basketball player, like a professional basketball player, and he was that good. Like, he was good enough to become a professional basketball player, and he had this plan to go to college, and he had this whole career lined up. And then he says, but then God told me, and it's like, but then God told me to give it all up and follow me and go to the kingdom and do this and that. And he always tell me, though, that was the dream, though. That was the dream, That's the one that got away. That was the dream, but God took that dream, So hearing that, I was like, oh, God, oh, boy. And then you hear my mom's story, and growing up in a different country, her plan was not to live here, but she had different plans until God showed up, and then here's a new plan. Here's a new story. And I always, growing up, I said, I'm a dreamer. If you've been around me long enough, you'll figure that out. I'm a big-time dreamer, and so I've always had dreams since I was a kid. I've wanted to be everything, and I still do. And ask my family. Even in college, I would change like every week. And now I'm going to be this and that. It's a problem I have. There's medicine for it, though. So, I always had this thing of tons of dreams. And I remember growing up saying, is God going to take my dream? Like I had this expectation. They didn't say it. They didn't teach me it. They didn't project that onto me. But when I grew up, I was like, everyone says that God's got a calling for you, but it's not going to be your dream. And I was like, I was waiting for the day that Jesus knocked on my door and said, and John wanted to be a this until Jesus came. And it's almost like he's this boogeyman that comes to steal your dreams away. You have a calling. Everyone hears that. But it's not going to be your calling. It's going to be to go to Africa and to be, but Lord, And so I always had, maybe it was subconscious, I always had like 9,000 dreams. So if you took away that one, I'm prepared. I've got backups for my backups. Like, I dare you, Lord. You could take any of these categories. Feel free. But you take those away, I've got backups. Because growing up, I just felt like God was coming to just take away my plan and my future. And I don't know if anyone else has felt that, and that's real life. And that's people, does God want me to be in the ministry? If I really love him, do I have to leave from the ministry? Am I not serving him? And then if I have dreams, he's going to take it all away. And he was somebody that if I got too close, he would require too much. Like, I'm scared to get too close. Why? Because I know he's super good, and he's lovely, and he's amazing, and he is so infectious that I know I will succumb to it, and I know I will give up my dream. So I don't even want to get too close to Jesus because he'll ask too much. And I know I'll give it away because he's that good. And so it's almost this scary thing of, man, if I get too close to Jesus, he's going to take it away. And even for me growing up, that was a struggle. And I think in a lot of ways, through lots of different things, you want to keep a distance because I know if I get too close, you're going to ask too much that I don't want to give. And God is somehow coming to take away my dreams and the life that I had planned. And so tonight we're going to talk about that. We're going to talk about that state of mind and how powerless it really is. It's contrary because we think we have the power by holding on to our life and the way it is and the way we have it planned and what we're going to do and all these things. And we feel in power because he's not controlling it. But the reality is it's one of the most powerless states that we can be. And we weren't designed for that. Okay, and again, I'm talking from experience, but we're going to dive into here, and we're going to see a story that's got a famous verse in it that adorns most Christian bathrooms. And we'll see it. It's in Matthew 17. So before we get into, I'll give you context. This is, Jesus had just gone on a mountain retreat with 3 guys. I don't know why they got chosen, but if I'm the other ones, I want to go. But they get chosen, and so they go up the mountain, and they're having a camping trip with Jesus. And he gets transfigured, and we're not even going to talk about how all that is. And so he has weird experiences on the mountain. Back below, okay, there's a different story going on. Back below, for the rest of the 9, they have quite a different experience. Everyone else has experienced a camping retreat with Jesus. They're experiencing something different. If you want to follow along, this is in Matthew 17. I'll start at verse 14. This is Jesus coming down, okay? At the foot of the mountain, a large crowd was waiting for them. a man came and knelt before Jesus and said, "Lord, have mercy on my son. He has seizures and suffers terribly. He often falls into the fire or into the water." Like, you're not watching him? "So I brought him to our disciples, but they couldn't heal him." So this is what Jesus says. "You faithless and corrupt people." He's talking to his disciples. He's not talking to anyone else. "You faithless and corrupt people." He just got off his camping trip. "How long must I be with you?" But Jesus, "How long must I be with you? How long must I put up with you?" But remember that one time I prayed in faith, Jesus? "How long must I be with you? Bring the boy here to me." Then Jesus rebuked the demon in the boy, and it left him. From that moment, the boy was well. Hooray. If I'm the disciples, oh boy. Like Jesus coming. I bet they tried casting out that demon so fast when they saw Jesus coming down the mountain. Hurry, 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 hurry. Get out now. Like they tried everything. They were punching that kid. They're doing whatever they could. Get out fast. And then the master comes. He's like, "You knuckleheads, how long do I have to be here? Why couldn't you do it?" Right? And they feel so dumb because Jesus does it like that. You ever have people, "I can't get the darn TV to change inputs." And then, somebody comes in and does it in a second. And you're like, come on. There's too much laughing in here. Nobody point. And we say, "How did you do it so easy?" And that's what it was. Jesus came down and he's like, "Jesus, we can't change the boy's input." And he's like, "You just got to press the button. I tell you 5 times, And then he just does it so fast. And so these guys are feeling like super, you know what that's like. You know what that feels like. Oh, yeah. So they come up to him, of course, and afterwards they say, in verse 19, it says, "Afterward the disciples asked Jesus privately." Yeah, not in front of everybody. You know what I mean? "Yeah, Jesus, that's what we were going to do next." You had it. "But I'm glad you came so you get the glory." Glory to be to Jesus, So no, in private, they wait for him and they ask him, "Why couldn't we cast out that demon?" And this is what he says. "You don't have enough faith," Jesus told them. "I tell you the truth. If you had faith, even as small as a mustard seed, you could say to this mountain, 'Move from here to there,' and it would move. Nothing would be impossible." That's the one on the bathrooms in Texas. Praise him. Yeah, nothing's impossible. You need that extra motivation sometimes. So let's just stop for a moment. Jesus calls them faithless people. These are his disciples. Okay? Faithless and corrupt people. Wait a second. And then Jesus says the reason they couldn't cast out the spirit is because they don't have enough faith. He's like, even if you had the faith of a mustard seed, you could have done it. Now, if I'm the disciples, I'm seriously offended. Like, seriously offended at Jesus, right? And why is that? Because we know that they had already cast out demons before this moment. Okay? So here, follow me. We're going to go here because we got to understand what they're feeling. All right? In Matthew 9:38, it's not going to be up here, but Jesus told his disciples about the harvest. In the very next chapter, he picks it up and he says, Jesus called his 12 disciples together and gave them authority in Matthew 10 to cast out evil spirits and heal every kind of disease. So then he commands them, he says, now go and do it. Go heal the sick, go raise the dead, go cure those with leprosy, and cast out demons. So he talks about the harvest, and then he says, let me give you guys authority. Now he says, I'm sending you guys out. And there was a big group, 72 people who went out. And he sends them out, okay? This is 7 chapters before the moment we were talking about. 7 chapters before. He gives them authority. Now, we have the report in Luke 10:17. This one should be up there. It says, the 72 returned with joy and said, Lord, even the demons submit to us in your name. So wait a second. These guys that Jesus said, you have no faith, you have no faith, not even a mustard seed. If I'm sitting there saying, don't you remember the time that we went out there and cast out all those demons? And you're telling me that I don't have enough faith to do it again? Like, wait a second. They had already done it. So how could Jesus possibly be saying, you don't have enough faith? It doesn't make sense. And if I'm the disciples, I'm offended. Jesus, you know I have enough faith. So what happened? Why couldn't they do it this time that they had done so many times before? What happened to them? The only way we're going to find this out is looking for context clues, okay? If you guys ever run into problems like that and question the Bible, but why does that happen? I encourage you, just go back a chapter and you'll usually find some context clues that give you the reason. What was going on? So we're going to do that. All right, we're going to jump back into Matthew 16. We were in Matthew 17. Now we're jumping back into Matthew 16. This was 6 days before they went on their trip, okay, to the camp, to the mountain. This is 6 days before that, all right? In Matthew 16, we are given the incident, the clue that helps us understand their state of mind when the boy came. Let's pick up Matthew 16, verse 21. This says, "From then on, Jesus began to tell his disciples plainly that it was necessary for him to go to Jerusalem and that he would suffer many terrible things at the hands of the elders, the leading priests, and the teachers of religious law. He would be killed, but on the third day he would be raised from the dead." This was the first time he tells his disciples, guys, I'm going to go die. I have to die. Not only am I going to die, it's not I'm going to be murdered. He's saying it's necessary that I go die. Now, you are one of the disciples. You signed up to this rabbi who's really popular. His teachings are amazing. And you're following him. You're so exciting. And the movement is getting momentum. And there's crowds now and there's people. And he comes and sets you aside and he says, listen, I'm going to die by choice. Now you as a disciple are like, huh? One more time? Like, no. I'm going to die. I have to die. And I'm going to go to Jerusalem to do it. In fact, I'm going to get crucified. And for the first time, that's the biggest bombshell. You know why? Because you left everything already to follow this dude who now says, and I'm going to leave you all, and I'm going to die. But then he makes it so much worse. That's already like, where's the door? But it makes it so much worse because then he says, not only am I going to die, but I'm going to require that you die as well. Time out, okay? Time out. Let's pick that up in Matthew 16, 24 through 26. Then Jesus said to his disciples, if any of you wants to be my follower, you must give up your way of life. Take up your cross and follow me. If you try to hang on to your life, you will lose it. But if you give up your life for my sake, you will save it. And what do you benefit if you gain the whole world but lose your own soul? Is anything worth more than you? I'm surprised that no one ran away at that moment. I know jobs with higher quitting rates than the disciples had. Think about that. He only lost one. That's pretty good for what he was telling them to do. So he's sitting here and he's saying, now I'm going to die. That's already terrible. But then I want you to die. I need you to die. In fact, if you're going to be my disciple, I need you to pick up your cross. Now, let me give you some context clues that go beyond this. When Jesus was younger, there was a man named Judas of Gamala. Everyone say Gamala. That's just fine. Okay. So there's a guy named Judas of Gamala when Jesus was young. He would have been a boy at this age, okay? And he was a preacher who went around to the Galilean villages and small towns, and he would preach to the peasants and to the people like this, saying, do not pay any more taxes to Rome. And he would say, don't pay any tithe at the temple, because that is sin. We are being oppressed. Remember, the Jews were occupied by the Romans at this moment. So he's going around saying, stop paying taxes. Let's rebel. This guy got such a big following that he grew a peasant army, okay? And they were going to do a military overthrow, the best they could in their region, of the Romans. Obviously, that didn't happen. He gets squashed pretty quickly by the Romans. And most historians agree that this guy was crucified, okay? Jesus would have been a child underneath 10 at this point, which means that he would have known the story of the man who went around preaching against the Rome, against the institutions, against all of these things. And he would know from a message by Rome what happens to people who go against the system. They get crucified. Now, the Romans didn't even crucify their own citizens. It was illegal. It was so serious and crazy that they're like, we won't even do it to our people, but we'll do it to everyone else. That's how intense it was. So to send a message, they said, we will crucify this guy so any other Jew who gets the bright idea to speak against the system here is going to get crucified too. So when Jesus tells his guys, you need to pick up your cross, they're immediately going back to Judas and all the other examples they had of radical Jews who tried against the system and ended up crucified. He's telling them, listen, this is a rebel mission. We're going against Rome. We're going against the institution, and it's not going to end well. It will end in martyrdom. That's straight up what he tells them. And so when he says cross, man, that means so much to the disciples' minds. They're freaking out. Wouldn't you? Wouldn't you? This is going to kill you in the worst way possible, publicly and in shame. This will lead to that for you. This is the first moment Jesus drops this bombshell on them. Now think about it. They left Jesus to have a better life. Matthew was a tax collector, hated by everybody. But all of a sudden, when he's with Jesus, there's crowds surrounding him. And people want to be near him. And people are asking him for prayer. His whole attitude, everything about people, how they saw him change because he was with Jesus. Man, I want to go with Jesus because he's bettering my life. He's changing my life. And so many of us come to Jesus because we want him to make our lives better. But Jesus is saying, I offer you martyrdom. Wait a second. I don't like this. I like the crowd part. I don't like this part. And he's saying, no. To follow me, this is where we're going. I'm not going to make your lives better. I'm going to end it. What kind of promise from a rabbi? I'd be, no, sir. No, sir. No, sir. No. Can we discuss it? And I'm not the only one who had that response. Peter had the same response. That's the moment where Peter stands up to Jesus. He says, he pulls him aside. He's like, listen, let me tell you. And he tells him, God forbid this from happening. He said, God forbid it, Jesus. This will not happen to you. No, you're wrong. This will not happen to you. You see, he felt like all of us and all of the disciples certainly would. Do not throw away your life. And I don't know if I want to follow you into it. All right, this is the bombshell and this is the attitude that the disciples were in. This 6 days later, they go to the mountain. This is the attitude that they're in when a demon-possessed boy comes. They know that every miracle Jesus does, every sermon that Jesus preaches, every person he heals is only getting them closer to death. How insane is that? To be like, no, let's not pray for this guy this time. Let's save it for the big ones. Stop praying, Jesus. Stop preaching. Let's just save it. And let's do it a closed circle so no one sees it. So here comes this boy with a crowd. Here, disciples, heal him. Whew. But that's going to mean if I do that, then that's going to lead to death. This is the mindset that they're in when this guy comes and when the boy comes. They are scared for your life. And really, they're wrestling with what Jesus said. If you try to hold on to your life, you're going to lose it. And so they're sitting here trying to hold on to their lives, struggling internally with the commitment that it's actually going to take for this guy. And all of a sudden, it's costing way more than they thought it was going to cost. You ever been there? It's costing way more than I thought it was going to cost. You were to make my life better, and now you want to kill me. Now you want to lead me to death. What? What are you talking about? So is it any wonder that their faith was powerless? Because the name they were supposed to cast out demons was the name they were doubting severely their commitment to. So how are you supposed to do that? How are you supposed to use the power and the authority of a man that you are half in, half out? And I challenge you today, myself. How do we use the authority of a man that we're half in, half out? Believing. Am I really sold on this? I was fine when you made my life better, but to lose my life for you is too much. I want to propose that they could not. The reason they could have done it lots of other times before, but they couldn't do it this time, is because they were afraid of losing their lives. For the first time in such a real way, they were afraid of losing their lives. And that fear of holding on to their life led to the loss of their faith. And it made their faith powerless, and they couldn't do it. So if that's true, we should see other examples. And I want to reinforce this with another story in the Scriptures, okay? And it's found in Matthew 14, and this is the famous story of Jesus walking on the water. And my homeboy Peter, I love Peter, he's Peter. So I'll give you some context before we get to the verse. The storm's happening, they're out freaking out, and a person starts coming out the water, and they think it's a ghost because maybe that happened back. I don't know. Why is their first response, it's a ghost? I don't know what's happened on that lake, but whatever. So they're like, it's a ghost. And then let's pick up, this is Jesus talking in verse 27. But Jesus spoke to them at once. Don't be afraid, he said. Take courage. I'm here. Dun, 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 dun. Then Peter called to him, Lord, if it's really you. I love that. It's like, if it's really you. He's just weird. Why does he say this? If it's really you, tell me to come to you. Why? Why? I would have said, if it's really you, come into the boat then with an umbrella. Like, if it's really you. Instead, he's like, I dare you to ask me to run on that water. You don't think I will, ghost, but I will. Like, he's challenging a ghost. He's like, come on, ghost, tell me to run on that water. I'll do it. You think I can't swim to the bottom? I could do that too. So Peter's just like, I dare you, if it's really you, tell me to walk on the water. And so Jesus is like, yeah, come, I guess. I'll just stop here. So Jesus just stops in the water. And Peter went over the side of the boat and walked on the water towards Jesus. I'm sure everyone was like, yeah, good luck. Like, let's get rope. They're like, let's get rope. But he jumps out and somehow he lands. However that looked would have been cool. So then he starts walking. Is he, I don't know, is he jumping? I would be testing it, Like, I don't know what he's doing. So he starts walking on the water and he starts getting to Jesus, but what happens? But when he saw the strong wind and the waves, he was terrified and began to sink, saying, save me, Lord, save me. Blah, blah, blah. He shouted, and Jesus immediately reached out and grabbed him, saying, you have so little faith. Why did you doubt me? Why did you doubt me? Now, think about that. Again, if I'm the disciples, I'm offended. Yes, I get offended easily as a disciple. But if I'm the disciples, I'm offended. I'm offended. Because I'm sitting there thinking, and I like to imagine that he sunk very slowly like quicksand. It wasn't like a whoosh. I like to imagine it starts going to his ankles and then his knees like, come on, just do it, come on. I see you, just come here now. And Jesus just like, come on, hurry. And so that's what I like to imagine, because they're having a conversation. So anyways, I like to imagine that, and he slowly starts sinking. And Jesus comes up to him, and he says, but Peter, you have so little faith. And if I'm Peter, I'm saying, what are you talking about? I walked 15 yards. There's my faith. What are you talking about? Think about that. It took faith to walk, didn't it? Come on, he doesn't get credit. He does not get credit for this. That took crazy faith. None of the other guys did it. None of them did. But he's like, if that's you, ghost Jesus, tell me. And he jumped out and he actually ran. That took faith. So how can Jesus again say, you of little faith? I'd be offended. That's one of the biggest faith moments, I would argue, of the disciples. Any of them while Jesus was there. Come on. He walked on water. Yet when Jesus picks him up, he says, you have so little faith. Why did you doubt me? Sounds similar, right? You have little faith. You have little faith. Why did you doubt me? This phone, when I first got this phone, and they had when they first came out with the big iPhones, you all remember seeing it for the first time. You're like, dang, that screen is huge. And you're like, nobody will use that screen. It's so big. It's like a mini computer. And everyone's like, it's just so big. And the first time you held it in your hand, you're like, my fingers barely go around. And then you were just so amazed by how big the screen looked. And you said, wow, that's so cool. The screen is so big, right? When you got the first iPhone, it's so big, it's so huge. But then if you take this and you put it next to this, well, what was super big is now small in comparison. Do you get me? I thought this was huge, but then I found an iPad. I was like, oh my God, look at that iPad. And I said, this iPad's so huge, but this one's so small now. So I used to think this was big when I compared it to other phones. But now when I compare it to this, it's really tiny. This is perspective. Okay, this is perspective. So Peter had a huge faith to step out on the water. Oh, it's so big. Look at it. He's walking on the water. But guess what? The moment he started fearing for his life, his doubt and his fear of holding on to his life was this. And all of a sudden, in comparison, his faith looked pretty little. I want to challenge you. When Jesus looks at your faith, he compares it to your doubt. It's always in comparison. It's always in comparison. But Jesus, my faith is so big. Remember that time I did that? Look at my faith. Yeah, but then he holds this up, and this is you holding on to your life and your doubts and your fears and everything else. And he goes, you have such a little faith. And we're like, no, I don't. Look how big it is. No, you don't. Perspective. It's perspective. When God looks at your faith, it's always in comparison to your doubts and your fears, and you're holding on to your life and what you want out of life. The fear of your life is always going to be bigger than your faith. So every time he comes and every time but God, I want to, and you pray and you have faith and you have all these things, yeah, but how big is this one? How big is your faith really in comparison to everything else? Or will we be fooled too? And Jesus comes, you of little faith. Which camp are we in? It's challenging, I know, but which camp are we in? But it also goes to show us that when we are afraid, our faith loses power. It gets so much smaller. When we fear for our lives, our faith gets so much smaller. When we try to hold on to our lives and control of our lives and where we're going and what we're doing and my plans and my futures, our faith is actually pretty dang small in comparison. Because our dreams will always be bigger than our faith. The things that you want will always seem bigger than your faith. The things that you are planning on will always be bigger than your faith. Always. Always, always. That's why it requires faith to follow Jesus. Why? Because your plans are so much bigger in your head and in your heart. They're easy to follow, your plans, aren't they? They're so easy. No one ever has to say, oh, try to following your dreams. Try to following what you want to do in life is really difficult, isn't it? You know, getting what you want and doing what you want is really hard, isn't it? No, that's why it takes faith. So in both of these stories, Peter walked on the water until he feared for his life. The disciples could cast out demons until they feared for their life. In both cases, the fear for life, of not having control and losing your life to Christ, made their faith powerless. It made their faith powerless. And this was only one story of Peter doing it. There's so many others, and we won't touch all of them. But there is one really significant one that I wanted to encourage us, because there's going to be a lot of people here. You know, we struggle with this idea of losing our life for Christ. I thank God that we are not in threat of literally losing our life for Christ today. There are many believers that are. So I count it as a blessing. But there is no smaller cost spiritually for you. It is full death. It is the death. It is what's coming for you. Following Christ, just like the disciples, will require the loss of your life. And the longer you're with Jesus, it will cost it. Eventually, it will cost it. It will cost your life, which means I'm putting him in control and I won't be in control, which means giving up whatever it is that I think is so important, the dreams that I hold on to. But this is a struggle. This is a struggle, and we're going to see it's a struggle. I want to talk about the time that Jesus first meets Peter. Now, this is so interesting, and it's debated, I'll admit, and many scholars and people like this, but I'll give you my interpretation. You can study it for yourself, okay? But the first time Jesus meets Peter is recorded in John 1. All right, so Peter's brother, Andrew, was one of John the Baptist's disciples, and he was there when John pronounced Jesus the Messiah. He follows Jesus right away, okay, and finds out where he lives. So he's John's disciple, and Jesus comes, and a dove goes on him, and then he dunks him in the water, right? And John the Baptist says that this is the Messiah. This is the one you've been looking for. This is the guy. And this Andrew right here is there. He's there. He sees the whole thing. Oh, my God, that's him. That's the Messiah, okay? Andrew is Peter's brother. I'm going to throw names around, but follow me. Andrew is Peter's brother. Right? Peter, our homeboy that just jumped off the boat and did the whole thing. That's his brother, Andrew. So he was there when Jesus got baptized. And then he comes back up. He was there. So as soon as he sees him, Andrew, this is what it says in John 1, starting in verse 40. It says, Andrew, Simon Peter's brother, was one of the two who heard John's witness and followed Jesus. The first thing he did after finding where Jesus lived was find his own brother, Simon, which is Peter. You know, the Bible does this. Simon is Peter, okay. Simon, telling him, we've found the Messiah, that is the Christ. And he immediately led him to Jesus. And Jesus took one look up at him. This is Peter, the first time they meet. Remember, later they'll be jumping off boats together. But the first time they meet, he looks up at him. And his brother comes, he's like, we found the Messiah, let me lead you to him. And they lead him to him. And then he meets him, and Jesus looks up to him. And this is what he says. You're John's son, Simon. How did you know? Right. Here, Johnson. And he says, from now on, your name is Cephas. What? Your name is Cephas, or Peter, which means rock. We all know the famous story. He's like, you are Peter, upon which I'll build my... He said it here first when they first met. You're going to be Cephas. And I'd be like, you're going to be crazy. I don't know you. Like, stop leading me to people, Andrew. Andrew keeps bringing me to somebody every week saying, it's the Messiah. Stop it, Andrew. So he's like, you're going to be Cephas. Okay, this is the first time they meet. This is right after Jesus' baptism. This is the first time this is what starts their wonderfully weird relationship. It's awesome. This is the first time, and it's so weird and perfect, just like the rest of it. Okay, so then when was he actually called? Let's pick that up in Mark 1, 16 through 18. Passing along the beach of Lake Galilee, he saw Simon, which is Peter, remember? Simon is Peter, and his brother Andrew, the guy who led. Look, Jesus, you got to meet my brother, Cephas, okay? So these are them. They're out there fishing because they're fishermans. And so they're out there fishing, net fishing, and fishing was their regular work. And Jesus says to them, come with me. I'll make you a new kind of fisherman out of you. I'll show you how to catch men, women, instead of perch and bass, which sounds really creepy. Like, I'll show you how to catch all kinds of people. Okay, so he says, instead of fish, why don't you catch people? So they didn't ask questions. They dropped their nets and they followed. That's bizarre. But this was not their first meeting. A lot of people think that's when Jesus just rolled up to strangers in a boat and it's like, hey guys, come on, let's go catch people. No, I don't want to catch people with you, you strange man. No, they knew him. They had already been introduced. And Andrew already believed that this is the Messiah. I was there when he got baptized. And now he's back. And this rabbi saying, come with me, I choose you guys. Wow. That's super cool. So they drop their nets and they follow him. That's super great. We all know that story. It's really good. But here's something that I never really picked up on, okay? At some point during this time, he starts following him. At some point, this is where it's argued. You can look it up for yourselves. But at some point, things got difficult. Maybe it was the money. Maybe it was, I don't know, because Peter was the only married disciple that we know. Okay, Peter had a wife. Didn't say he had children, but chances are when one has a wife. So he probably had little Peters running around. And he had a mother-in-law to take care of. We know that because they go to Peter's mother-in-law's house with Jesus later. So he's got a mother-in-law that he's also taking care of. And so there's a lot of responsibilities on him. Not to mention he's in a fishing business that you'll see with two other guys. He's got a fishing thing going on. And there's just a lot of pressures and a lot of things going on. Again, we don't know what happened. But according to what we'll see, it appears, in my conclusions at least, it appears that Peter went back to fishing. Okay? After the drop your nets and follow me part. So he goes with them and he's dropped the nets and he's following Jesus for a while. But then whatever happens, he goes back to the nets and he goes back to being a fisherman. I know. This is interesting, right? This is maybe new for you. But let's read in Luke 5, 1 through 11. This is going to read the whole story for you, okay? One day, as Jesus was preaching on the shore of the Sea of Galilee, he's back, great crowds pressed in on him to listen to the word of God. And he noticed two empty boats at the water's edge, for the fishermen had left them and were washing their nets. Stepping into one of the boats, Jesus asked Peter, Jesus asked Simon, its owner, to push it out in the water. What was Simon doing? He was there. He was working. Okay? And as we'll see, he was out there fishing all night without catching anything. He was not with Jesus, he was fishing, okay? So he's fishing. So he sat in the boat and he taught the crowds from there with Peter in his boat. All right, when he had finished speaking, he said to Simon, Peter, now go out where it's deeper and let down your nets to catch some fish. Master, Simon replied, we worked hard all last night and didn't catch a thing. Again, where was he? He was still fishing. But wait a second, he dropped his nets and followed him. He was still fishing all night, okay? So he worked hard and we didn't catch a single thing. But if you say so, I'll let the nets down again. And this time, their nets were so full of fish that they began to tear. And a shout for help brought their partners in the other boat. This is verse 7. A shout for help brought their partners in the other boat. And soon, both boats were filled with fish on the verge of sinking. When Simon Peter realized what had happened, he fell to his knees before Jesus and said, "Oh Lord," listen to this, "Oh Lord, please leave me." Did you know he said that to Jesus? "Oh Lord, please leave me. Please, just leave me." But why? I'm such a sinful man. Do you know that about him? This is self-described. I'm such a sinful man. Leave me. He just did a miracle, and in the presence of this holiness and Jesus being exactly who he said he was, that Andrew said, this is the Messiah, he does this miracle, sign, and wonder, and he says, I have nothing to do with you. Leave me. I am not worthy to be next to you. I am not a sinner. I am such a sinner. Anybody ever felt like such a sinner? He is such a sinful man. For he was awestruck by the number of fish they had caught, as were the others with him. His partners, James and John. Notice his brother Andrew is not there fishing with him. His brother Andrew was there when he first called them. His brother Andrew is no longer fishing with them. His partners, James and John, were there, and the sons of Zebedee were also amazed. And Jesus replied to Simon, don't be afraid. Stop being afraid. Don't be afraid anymore. Don't be afraid. From now on, you'll be fishing for people. Again, he repeats, you're going to be fishing for people, man. Stop being afraid. You're going to be fishing for people. And as soon as they landed, they left everything and followed him. So we have it again. They dropped their nets and followed him. Now with three other guys. They dropped their nets and followed him. Why is this good news? This gives us hope. This gives us a lot of hope, okay? Because Jesus didn't give up on Peter. So Jesus didn't give up on him. So Peter, first time he calls him, he comes and he serves, but whatever happened, whatever his reason was, I'm sure it was really good that he stopped being with him and he went back to his work and he went back to his old life and he went back, and this Jesus is great, but I just have so much going on right now that he left and went back. Yet Jesus shows up to his boat. He goes walking and looking and he finds those empty boats and he gets into his boat and says, will you push out again? He doesn't give up on Peter. He doesn't give up on Peter. And let me tell you, maybe you've tried losing my life for Christ. Maybe I've tried living like that. Maybe I've tried being radical. Maybe I've tried being just this kind of soul that I would drop my nets and follow Jesus. Maybe I've tried that at different times in my life, but for whatever reason, maybe I was disappointed, maybe it didn't work out, maybe I had such need, maybe there's too much pressure from everyone else, and I had so much to do that I just couldn't do it, so I went back to my way of life. That's the story of a lot of people. I went back to my way of life. But let me tell you, just like tonight, and just like he always does, he shows up to your boat. And he's saying, no, stop being afraid. That's what he tells him. Don't be afraid. Stop being afraid. Stop being afraid. You know, they didn't fill up their boats when they were out there fishing. That's a big deal for them because that's their livelihood. So what does Jesus do? He fills their boat till it's exploding with fish and almost going to capsize them. And then he says, don't be afraid. Why? Because I can provide better for you than you possibly can for yourself. Stop being afraid. Chances are he went back for the money. Stop being afraid. Let me prove it to you. I can get you more fish than anybody else can. I can provide better than you can. And your way of life and your plan for your life sounds super good, but boy, I can capsize your boat with my fish. This is Jesus. This is what he's saying. Stop being afraid. Stop being afraid you won't have enough. I can fill your boat. Stop being afraid. And the good news is that he comes back for you. I don't care how many times you've walked away. I don't care how many times you've said, I'm going to live for Christ, and then I walked away. He comes back to your boat, and he says, I still want you to be a fisher for men. That thing I called you to be, I still want you to do it. That plan I have for your life, I still want you to do it. You do not run out of time. I still got time for you, and I'm coming back for you because you're a part of this. You're a part of this plan. That's the good news. Not only that, but it doesn't matter the sin, the shame, the things that have happened since then. Since I used to walk real close with Jesus, but boy, I went away. It doesn't matter. He said, leave me, I am such a sinful man. And Jesus says, don't be afraid. Don't be afraid. Come on. Come on. He didn't say, oh yeah, you're right. Let me walk away now. Awkward. Can you row us back into shore? He didn't say that. He said, don't be afraid. I don't care. Don't be afraid. I still want you to be a fisher of men. I still have a calling. Don't be afraid. It's not too late. even if you've walked away and gone back to normal life and what it was like, and even if that involves all the sin that you can imagine, it's not too late. It's not too late to live with your life totally lost for Christ. It's not too late. And that's the encouraging thing. You know, Peter would continue to struggle with his care for life throughout all of the scriptures. And I encourage you to do a study of that. We won't get into all that. He continued to do it, whether walking on the water, denying Christ 3 times. Why? Because they were going to, you're the guy with him? No, I'm not. 3 times he denies him. Why? Because he's afraid of losing his life. Peter experienced this throughout the whole time. Even when Jesus comes back from the dead, Jesus appears to him and says, do you love me? And he's like, well, yeah, Lord, I love you. Then feed my sheep. Do you love me? Yeah, Lord, I love you. Then shepherd my people. Do you love me? Yes, Lord, I love you. Then feed my sheep. He keeps telling him, do you love me? Then take over the work that I'm doing. But then he ends it with this. He says, and if you do this, I'm paraphrasing it for you. You can look it up. But he says, you are going to die. He says, when you were a young man, you dressed yourself and did whatever you want. But when you're an old man, they're going to stretch out your arms. They're going to dress you for you. And they're going to take you to places you don't want to go. He was referring to crucifixion. Did you know that Jesus Christ prophesied over him that he would be crucified? After he came back from the dead, you're back. You're going to get crucified if you keep going. Oh, boy. So the guy who struggled the most with losing his life before Jesus dies says, do you love me? Yeah. Do you want to follow me? Yeah. It's going to cost you your life still. Maybe he thought he got out of it, but he said, it's still going to cost you your life if you follow me. So the day of Pentecost comes, and the Holy Spirit comes, and a crowd gathers because there's weird noises happening in this weird little room, and they hear this rushing wind, and all this crowd gathers. And they're all standing there, and they're all questioning, what's going on? Are they drunk? Are they weird? Or we can hear them in our language. There's miracle signs and wonders. And who is the person that stands outside at the moment when the crowd is there? It's the same guy who feared for his life when he jumped out the boat. It's the same guy who feared for his life and went back to work. It's the same guy who denied Christ 3 times. It's the same guy who told, this is going to kill you if you open your mouth. Starting in Pentecost, it will kill you. This is the same guy. And that same guy stood out front in front of a crowd and preached the message that would get him crucified. Jesus is the Messiah, and you guys killed him, and he was saying things that they know will lead to my death, but I'm going to say it. That's the same guy. Listen, you cannot do it on your own. What was the difference? What was the difference? It was the Holy Spirit. We need the Holy Spirit's enabling, empowering ability in us to be able to finally let go of my life and my plans and the way it's going to be. You cannot do it without him. We need the Holy Spirit's help in this. The Holy Spirit gives us the boldness to say, I will lay down my life for you, God. And we see the difference before and after. And I'd like you to imagine when Jesus, that first time in the boat, when he says, I'm going to make you fishers of men. And then he pulls up all of these fish, more than they could carry, right? More than the boats could carry. It's about to sink. That's so much. And he says, now I'm going to make you fishers of men. Now let's fast forward to Pentecost. What happened? Now he's standing outside, being a fisher of men, just like his master had prophesied he would be. And in a similar way, as if to smile, as if he would notice, the fish that is about to break the boats are 3,000 people who give their life to Jesus in one moment. How cool is that? And I know in that moment, Jesus was in heaven crying his eyes out, saying, that's my boy, I'm so proud. I knew you could do it. And Peter knew at that moment, I let go of my life, and I let go of being afraid of losing my life, and I actually opened my mouth. I became exactly what he called me to be. Exactly what he said I would be. He said I would do this. I'd be a fisher of men. And just like my master, look at all the fish. It's breaking our boats. It's just like me. What a moment that would have been. What a moment that would have been. And from then on, the powerless Peter goes on to his shadow healed people. That never happened to Jesus that we have recorded. His shadow would heal people. They lined up the sick on the streets So Peter would walk by. This is the man who feared for his own life. And his shadow was healing people. Why? Because Jesus was going behind him. His shadow was healing people. Come on. When he finally let go of his life, he was the first one to bring salvation to the Gentiles, the non-Jews. He got that honor. He received visions from heaven. He was miraculously broken out of jail by an angel. We're talking power, signs, and wonders that did not exist before he let go of his life. The fullness is on the other side of you letting go of your life. The power, the Christianity worth living. I'm sorry, Christianity is not worth living unless you lose your life. Or it's a belief. Come on, the Christianity that's worth living is on the other side of finally losing my life and saying, you are in control, not me. You are in control, not me. Peter lived that before and after is astounding. Is absolutely astounding. And just like he had that moment with Jesus, you have a moment like that with Jesus. But it's on the other side of letting go. It's on the other side of losing your life to Christ, losing my plans, my future, my things. You know, I always thought that he was going to come and steal my dreams. He was going to come and take them away. I know you're going to do it if I get close to you. Dang it. I know you're going to steal away what I like to do. I know you're going to steal away even the things I think I want. I think I want a lot of money in my life. I think I want a certain kind of house. I think I want a certain kind of lifestyle. I think I want a certain kind of profession in my life. I think I want a certain this and that in my life. I think I want this sin in my life. I think I want all of these things in my life. And if I get close to you, you are going to cost me that, and I will lose it. So we hold on to him tightly. I did it. We hold on to him really tightly. But it is a scam. It is a scam. True fulfillment and true power and true fulfillment in life only comes when I let go of what I think I wanted. When I let go of my plans is when I'm super full in life. And you could tell me, no, John, that's not true because my dream is good. Yeah, that's nice, but God's is better. And I'm going to prove it, and this is how we're going to close. Okay, I'm going to prove it to you. This is what Paul says in 1 Corinthians 15. So he's talking about the resurrection body, the difference between the resurrected body and our mortal bodies right now, okay? So some skeptic is sure to ask, show me how resurrection works. Give me a diagram. Draw me a picture. What does this resurrection body even look like? If you look at this question closely, you realize how absurd it is. There are no diagrams for this kind of thing. We do have a parallel experience in gardening. Listen to this. There is no visual likeness between seed and plant. You could never guess what a tomato would look like by looking at a tomato seed. What we plant in the soil and what grows out of it don't look anything alike. The dead body that we bury in the ground and the resurrection body that comes out from it will be dramatically different. Now let's apply this to losing your life. What if our plans and our life died so we could take up Christ's? What if we were that seed? And everybody looks at this seed and, boy, it looks dead. It looks like I don't know what's going to happen out of this thing. These are our plans in life. These are the things that we hold on to precious and dear. The things we studied for. These are the things we want to become. These are all these things that we think we want in life. But we don't know what's inside of that thing. You don't. You could live your life with a handful of seeds. You could live your life with your seeds, and that sounds great. And you could hope and hope and hope that these turn into something. But let me tell you, you don't know what could come out of you losing your life. That's what it says. You can't identify a tomato by the seed. That's just a seed. In the same way, what could come out of your life if you lost it? He says it doesn't resemble what goes into the ground, does not resemble what comes out. I want to challenge you. What goes into the ground, your life that you're planning and all these things, what goes into the ground may not look at all what's about to come out. It may not look at all what's about to come out. And that's what he wants. And that's what he's got planned. Peter was a fisherman. But when he went into the ground and stopped fearing for his life and getting control, He turned into a founder of the church. From fisherman to founder of one of the greatest faiths ever. Okay? That's a big difference. And he could have never dreamed of that. You think him growing up, son, you're going to be a fisherman just like your daddy was a fisherman, just like grandpa was a fisherman, and great-grandpa was a fisherman, and that's going to be you. That's what you have to look forward to. And all of a sudden, through a man named Jesus, he said, if you bury your life in me, you can become something that doesn't even resemble what goes into the ground. You don't know what's on the other side. Yet it's so scary to bury it. But I guarantee you, if you bury it, if you lose your life for Christ, you will gain it. And what comes out of the ground won't look like anything that went in. And that's a good thing because it's going to be better. Ask any person who would say and share their testimony with you that says, I did this for Christ. I gave up this for Christ. I did all these things for Christ, like my parents. And I used to look at them saying, God, you cost me this and this and this and this. And they all say, I would never take it back for a single second. I never dreamed I would be doing this and that. And now look at what I am and what I do with my life. I would have never imagined. You can have that same before and after. I want to encourage you, especially if you feel like your faith is just powerless, man. And all I do is pray and I pray and I pray, but I can't cast the demon out. Maybe I used to be able to do this and that. And my faith was so strong and my faith was so big, but compared to my holding on to life, my faith actually looks really small right now. My faith is really tiny compared to what I'm holding on to. It's really tiny. It's keeping back your faith. Don't let it keep back your faith anymore. What would happen to your faith if you let go of your life? Let me just imagine that. What would happen to your faith if you let go of your life? Amen?